Hi everyone, I'm Nate and welcome to Elevate with Nate, a place for learning, growth and self-improvement. Join me as we explore a wide range of topics, sharing insights and new knowledge from my personal learning journey. So far in this channel, we've discussed many different topics and things for you to learn about. But today, let's talk about a few different techniques to make learning stick. And those techniques are spaced repetition and retrieval practice. So, to give a brief description of these two things, spaced repetition is essentially where instead of in one big go learning everything you want to learn, you instead break it into smaller chunks and you keep coming back to that same topic just when you're kind of about to basically forget about it. So you keep on just regularly, perhaps every 2 weeks or whenever, keep touching upon the same topics again and again. That's spaced repetition. Whereas retrieval practice is a similar concept, but instead, when you're coming back to repeat it, as opposed to just reading or just reading or looking over the content, you're actually forcing yourself to recall the content. So it's maybe, for example, doing a test or looking over your material, covering it up, and trying to repeat it without looking. Okay, you're forcing your brain to recall the information. Okay, so you might be thinking, what evidence is there to support these claims? And if you look at the graph which I'll be showing on the screen here, which is called the forgetting curve, as you can see here, when you first learn something for the very first time, you have, let's say now, 100% of the knowledge. But what happens with the human brain is, you naturally start to forget these things. And you can see the graph starts to curve down, down, down. And what eventually will happen is, with enough days, you will essentially know 0%, okay? You know nothing after maybe might be 2, 3, 4 months. So the whole point here is, if you keep on having that spaced repetition, every time that you, once again, look over some content, you get a spike up vertically back to 100%. Okay, again, assuming that you understood it first time around, let's assume that. But at that point then, what's nice here is the kind of the gradient, the rates that it goes down by decreases. So if you keep doing this more and more and more, eventually what happens here is then you'll decrease, so small that essentially you know it all forever. And just think about people in jobs who are doing things on a daily basis. The reality is they are doing this exact kind of curve every single day. So after doing something for a year, 2 years, or much more, of course, at that point on that graph, you're just at 100% constantly. So I actually learned about this and incorporated it back when I was teaching maths at schools. And what I'll do is, as an example was, let's say my students, I would teach them some content, but as opposed to simply just teaching them, let's say each topic in one big chunk and doing 2 weeks on it until they've understood it and move on, I would instead get them to a base level where they understood stuff pretty well. I'll make sure they had a pretty good base knowledge, so they understood the concepts, okay? Perhaps not the hardest questions, but they get it. At that point, I'll go on to the next topic. And then after 2 weeks, what happened there is, you get a mini test and bam, I'll give them the same content what I did in the first week. Then you have 2 more weeks passes and I give them, say, more new content. And then by week 4, you get another mini test, which will have now content from the entire of the first 4 weeks. And then by week 6, you get the entire content from the first 6 weeks. And what was happening here was, the students who are doing these tests, they were not only forced to repeat the content, so spaced repetition, but on top of that, I was forcing them to record the information. Okay, what really happened here was, as with that graph, each time they get better and better. And what is so nice here was, it actually required, say, less effort because you didn't have to at any point force yourself to go and revise. Just by simply doing these things over and over again and having me go through it afterwards, the students were learning this much better. So fast forward to the end of that academic year, and what will be happening is, many of the students in, let's say, a standard class who does it the usual way, will go, wow, that topic back from September, I haven't got a clue anymore. And don't get me wrong, they were taught very well and these kids were smart, but naturally with that graph, even if you knew things extra harder, say you took an extra week to learn it than in my class, sure, you might decline a bit slower, your curve, but after 6, 7, 8 months, it's pretty low down. Whereas my students go, oh yeah, that's a complete straw in the park. I've done that question every single 2 weeks for the last 7, 8 months. Which also gives them less stress for the exam because they go, right, I'll just top up this, top up that, and it's all good to go. So that's what's really useful when doing the two different techniques. But of course, this is not just applicable to students at school. It applies to anyone in this world learning almost anything. So think about, for example, if you're going to go and learn a new language, or you're trying to learn a new skill, let's say it was coding or whatever. You have to keep repeating the same content. Because if you instead just learn it once, you have your 2 weeks of being motivated and that's it. It's almost for nothing. You've forgotten it all. So many of these apps out there do try and help you out. So for example, if I use Duolingo to learn languages, what it'll do is, every now and then it will introduce vocab back from the past to try and keep it, current. But even then, it isn't, it can't do it all for you. So I recommend if you're doing that on a Duolingo or any app out there, do consciously every, a week, 2 weeks, you decide, keep going back just for 5 to 10 minutes and keep doing the same content. If you learn about something new they want to know about, every 2 weeks, just go back over it. And importantly, remember, don't just read it, test yourself on it. So an example with the coding might be, rather than looking through, let's say, a whole chunk of code which you once wrote, don't look at it, cover it up and try and write it again from scratch. That, I'm telling you, is a lot harder and will force your brain to think as opposed to just copying or reading. And look, I can give you a personal example just for me. During COVID, for 1 or 2 months thought I would download Duolingo for the first time, and I went to learn Mandarin. And I was doing pretty well, got far through it, might have had a 100-day streak. Guess what? I stopped doing it. If you now asked me anything in Mandarin, I would know 0. So essentially, that entire time that I did that was for nothing. Complete waste of time, because I didn't cement that knowledge. So what's the point? It's really important. If you're going to commit to something, commit to it and keep doing it until at that stage it sticks in your brain. Now, sure, don't get me wrong. If, let's say, now I went back and looked at some of the stuff, it might come back quicker, but in that moment where I want to use it, I wouldn't have it. So I think ultimately the message for this video and these two techniques is it's much better to try and aim for a mastery and to get there by doing these two separate spacing techniques, okay? There's nothing worse than someone, and you might know people out there like this, who keep trying new different things for a couple of months at a time. And what happens is, they're definitely working very hard in those months, but let's say now 2, 3, 4 years time, and they look back, and you can test them or ask them any of that information, they probably will know, actually, sadly, nothing. And then what was the point of those 4 years? Now, that doesn't mean you can't learn many things at the same time. It just means you have to plan it out better. So rather than doing one whole thing at one go and that's it, maybe have 2 things, but just organize it so that you're doing a bit in one day, a bit the other the same day, and then let's say after a week, you come back to both of them, etc. So by doing that, you keep that curve nice and up at 100 and not down at 0. So hopefully that helps, and hopefully now you understand the best methods out there to keep this working and to be the expert and master essentially whatever you want to learn. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and bell notification. Feel free to leave any comments and any suggestions for future content. And as ever, onwards and upwards.